Back in Columbus and at Ohio State. I think this is my fourth visit to Ohio State in the last 15 years, and today it sort of certainly supports what Tom has told me, that this is the San Diego of the Midwest, that it always has beautiful temperate weather in the mid-70s. So really glad to see that. I am a little bit humbled to be following BJ Fogg, and especially since the Grand Challenges of Social Work, which I'll talk about, has had a 2-year launch. I'm not sure that we couldn't have used some of his consultation a little bit earlier, but I'm delighted to come and talk about this. I know that Ohio State is also working in its own Grand Challenges process, and so I don't know a lot about that. I'll make little reference to that, but I'll try to tell you a bit more about the overall perspective of Grand Challenges, and then what the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, which I serve as president for, has been doing. So the Grand Challenges model, you may know all this from what you've learned about Grand Challenges on the campus. I think probably was originated by David Hilbert, who came up with 23 Grand Challenges for mathematics. Unlike what we did in social work, where we tried to consult broadly and get lots and lots of feedback and have a million phone call and face-to-face conference meetings about this, he came up with all of them himself. That's very efficient, but it wouldn't serve us in this day and age and in our profession. But nonetheless, I think his was the prototype. The National Academy of Engineering's Grand Challenge Initiative, and I think Tom said that we might have an engineer or two in the audience today. Did that turn out to be the case? Great, wonderful. Okay, so you can correct me, or I'd really be interested in your perspective on what the NAE Grand Challenge Initiative has meant. But in many ways, the Grand Challenges of Social Work initiative built on what the National Academy of Engineering did. And they had quite a head start, not only because Abraham Lincoln created the National Academy of Engineering, so they had a little head start historically, but also they've been doing this since, I think, well before 2010. And we initially met the American Academy, the Society for Social Work Research, and other scholars at Islandwood, and heard from two of the deans from USC and University of Washington who had been involved with the Grand Challenges and conceptualized that this would be a good idea for us. But let me tell you a little bit about the NAE and play a quick video, and then I'll get into our academy, the NAE's efforts, and then I'll get into the Academy's efforts. So as I understand it, the history was that engineers started to be concerned that there weren't enough applicants into engineering programs. They weren't diverse enough. They weren't domestic enough. They really wanted to try to create some excitement and explain to people, why is it important to be an engineer? What do engineers do? And they wanted to try to use this to communicate well to the public. And you probably can't read the fine print here, and I can read some of these to you. So they came up with 14 Grand Challenges. Apparently it was a mixture of mostly the National Academy of Engineering executive group, their leadership group, and some reaching out to regional folks. It was not as some of the other Grand Challenges have done, and perhaps as BJ Fogg would do, although very quickly, it did not involve reaching out to lots of people to get their ideas and doing a Delphi method, which is what NIMH has used and which Grand Challenges Canada has used. It was mostly leadership developed, but they came up with these challenges without any particular unanimity. Both of these deans agreed that not every challenge was going to seemed realistic to everyone, but that they wanted to have a challenge that basically every engineer could connect to. And I don't think they succeeded in that exactly, because I know that some other groups, like the biomedical engineers, have created their own Grand Challenges since this, but these are the ones that they came up with. Can you read those in the back? Okay, good. So I won't read through those. And they have really organized in many ways. I don't know if there's an organization for each of them, but they have begun to organize the profession around these Grand Challenges in terms of universities picking some of the Grand Challenges, 2 or 3, that they would emphasize in their school. with regard to conferences that were held, with regard to papers that were written that would review these areas. Some of you might have heard last spring that 40 deans of engineering schools came to the White House to talk with President Obama about the engineering initiatives, about the grand challenges, and what the federal government could do to advance, basically sort of melded together with the whole STEM concept, but what the federal government could do to advance these grand challenges. I don't think the grand challenge aspect of it was emphasized that much, but certainly for those of us with an ear to what the grand challenges created, this seems certainly like one of their initiatives. The website is I'm not going to take you to the NE website, but there's a lot of Grand Challenge information on it. This is, in a way, what the vision was that we started the Grand Challenges with, that in part we wanted to define the excitement, the potential, the power of social work. In part we wanted to use this to recruit the next generation of social workers, to expand the pool of people who see this as a incredibly important profession and role, and in a way to try to focus the broad efforts of social work towards some very influential and impactful interventions that would come out of these grand challenges. So that was the basic concept, to build on this National Academy of Engineering, to eventually, and we have commissioned now a video that would be something like this, but we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, to try to, and we don't have ExxonMobil behind us at this point, but we are looking for partners to support this work. And that's part of the effort too, is to reach out beyond the conversations we have with each other, to have a way to strengthen our partnerships with not only government and nonprofit organizations, but with other philanthropies that we haven't ever been able to reach, and perhaps even corporations and entities that we're not very involved with. Please, and also your reflections about my description of the NAE would be great.
I guess the thing is, you started out, and I like everything you said. The problem I'm having is anybody done any research to show that the initial objectives, for instance, the diversity issue, enhancement of diversity in STEM, engineering in particular, have been met because of what they did.
So
things aren't a pretty picture right now. It's getting worse, actually.
Is it? So the deans would say yes, it changed the picture, that there are a lot more domestic applications now. So there's certainly a wave of more poorly prepared students that you have to work against. But given that wave, they would argue that there are more domestically prepared students who are applying and are meet the criteria to become engineers and are enrolling in engineering programs. But you sound skeptical of that.
Well, yeah.
We were just talking, like at the beginning of today, that we read in the news that today there are less women in engineering than they were in the 80s.
Hey.
Okay, so and the other thing is that how do they know if they do some statistics on some domestic students? I mean, what's the real influence? Because, there's always a cycle in engineering, a huge cycle of enrollment. And we could be on the up cycle and everybody's saying we're success. OSU has more engineering students than ever. We have 10,000 students in the College of Engineering. Okay? I mean, in our department, we have 1,000 undergrads. But that's due to economics and cycles that people don't understand. So they can claim right now, things are looking good. But what's the real source? What's the real cause?
Yeah. So no, they did not do any kind of regression discontinuity design that says, okay, we started the grand challenges here, and here's what was going on before, and here's what's going on next. I think it is more of a sense that it's focusing people to have the right conversations. They would argue, I think, that they wouldn't have gone to the White House and gotten the ink that they did and talked directly with the president, not just talking with people in the Department of Energy or in transportation or the places that engineers usually go for conversations, or Department of Defense, but talking with the president. I think they would argue that catalyzing the profession also has been important.
I think that's true, and I think that it has what the deans are saying about directions and what you said about focus. with respect to programs. That is happening. That has been a productive outcome.
That's good to hear. Okay. Phew. I'm glad we have some claims for the basis for this, but of course, we are going our own way, and we are not completely tied to what the NA is doing, but we have certainly learned from it. Many of you have heard about the Gates Grand Challenges. Some of you may have even applied. This is the kind of setup everybody would dream of having, where someone comes up with a great idea, writes a 2-page proposal, and gets $100,000 in seed funding that they have to make progress on in a year, and then they go forward to, possibly bigger things. It's an important model. We're certainly going to be talking with the Gates Foundation about whether they would carve off anything for this Grand Challenge, although we haven't completed that. Grand Challenges Canada, I won't say a lot more about it, but this is something that they've also been working on. Some of these challenges have significant prizes. You know about the Grand Challenges to get to space. The Department of Energy has a Grand Challenge to try to make sure that all those wonderful waves that we hope to have visited this summer, and hopefully you got to visit some waves, are also having a dual purpose of generating energy. So they have a big prize. And so many people associate Grand Challenges with either the Gates Foundation, where there's a prize for the ideas, or something like the getting into space or wave energy. And so that's something that we have to work with in social work, is to figure out how do we get this going and keep it going and mobilize the effort without grand prizes. And I'm pleased to say that, at least in terms of getting very interesting submissions of working papers, including the one that came in from here from Audrey Begun and John Clapp and other colleagues on alcohol, that people did take the effort to write very interesting working papers, and that this project itself is moving forward without a very clear idea of what the payoff is. UCLA has a Grand Challenge. You can see that from this year, what's going on in LA, that they picked pretty safe topics: thriving in a hotter Los Angeles, and achieving 100% sustainability in energy, water, and biodiversity. So, and their themes, I think, of join the movement, learn, engage, and give are in many ways the themes that could also be reflective of what we're trying to do in the Academy. I know you have a Grand Challenge on big data. Are there other Grand Challenges? There's the singular one at this point.
No, they're organized under 4 discovery themes. So under energy and environment, food and food security and production, and health and wellness, and big data being an umbrella.
I see.
We're
Okay.
going to hear a little bit more about those umbrellas.
Great. I figured I wouldn't have to talk about that for too long, and that's a good thing since I don't know much about it. So this is what we decided to do in social work, to create this call for an audacious vision, bold innovation, and collective action, and to try to engage many disciplines. So try not to have this be focused, especially not to have it be focused only on social work education, but also try to cross over and get other disciplines involved in the creation of the Grand Challenges themselves, but more so in what we hope will be implementation of some of the projects that will arise out of the Grand Challenges. So, So these are the criteria that we set out for the Grand Challenges, that they were big but achievable goals, recognizing that social work has a reputation, deserved or not, for sometimes being grand and non-specific, requiring collaboration with it and beyond social work, depending on innovative scientific and policy approaches, generating widespread societal impact, and having measurable progress in a decade. So when we sent out requests for working papers and for ideas for Grand Challenges, which we started in 2012, I think the first meeting about this was 2011. We got a steering committee, which I'll describe in a bit. We started in 2011. We had a call for ideas. We got about 80 of those. We had a call for working papers. We got about more than 40 of those. And they were evaluated on those 5 grand criteria. The official launch for the Grand Challenges. So this is my first talk really about the selection of the Grand Challenges. the full set, which was just finalized a week or so ago, and even the content, that what we call the teaser paragraphs, the description of the grand challenges, those are all in draft form, but the 12 grand challenges are now finalized, and so I'm pleased to give them their world premiere here at Ohio State. This will go down in the history of the academy and maybe even the profession. It's our attempt to, so we've been working to this point. We involved an executive committee, which included some of the folks who were at that original Islandwood meeting, and especially weighted, exposed towards people from WashU who had been talking about this Grand Challenges idea with their people, but also members of the academy, leadership from SWR, leadership from NAD. So this has been a very hard-working group, incredibly busy people, but putting in lots of time, and in some cases, putting in significant in-kind costs in terms of lending us editors from their schools, providing meeting space, providing supporting meetings, supporting conferences, and we did recently put out a call for additional help for a communications team that we needed to hire in order to support this effort, and appreciated the contribution from Ohio State to help support that. So these are our 12 grand challenges, and they, of course, do not cover everything, and each of them has one or more working paper beneath them. One of the things we decided is we were not going to have a grand challenge, no matter how popular the idea might be, if we couldn't come up with a credible scientific team and credible paper that would describe the way that it met those 5 criteria. So even though there are many things that, as a profession, we say we want to do, and hopefully most of those are reflected in these grand challenges, we only in a very few cases did we say we absolutely have to have a grand challenge on this topic, and although we didn't get any submissions on it, we're going to reach out to people and try to put together a grand challenge. So we had hoped to be launching this last year, but we couldn't do that because we were still waiting for some work that needed to come in that would make sure that these were areas that we could really think we could make progress on, that could help us to coalesce as a profession, and that could lead us forward. So I'm going to take you through those in a bit, although quickly, because you have them in front of you, what the working paragraphs are. But anybody have any questions or anything else they'd like me to reflect on before we go to that step? Okay. I keep hitting backspace. I think I should know how to go forward. So this is a little confusing to people, and I think even our Grand Challenge Executive Committee took some time to sort this out, which is sort of what is the structure of this, and how are these Grand Challenges going to work? So, as I mentioned, we came up with the concept of Grand Challenges, then we asked for working papers. We hope those working papers would do one of two things: either help us to define a Grand Challenge, or in some cases to support and contribute to the shaping of a Grand Challenge. So each of the working papers has leading scholars and working paper authors, and in the working papers there should be some indication, it's not always very specific, I'll take you through one that is quite specific, of projects, of outcomes that we would want to see for each of these grand challenges. In addition to that, in the middle there, we mentioned Academy liaisons. We have a fellow of the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare connected to each of the grand challenges, just so that we can be sure that as we go forward, the Academy itself understands what's going to end up being a fairly disaggregated, distributed project. We don't expect to keep control over these grand challenges, as the National Academy of Engineering, which has many times the resources of the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, has decided not to do. They do not try to manage or control these separate efforts under the grand challenges. Those efforts become foci of interest groups, something like what we've had in the past with CSWE and some of their interest groups, or maybe a better fit with Society for Social Work Research and their special interest groups, but something larger than that that we hope will emerge out of these. And then we are closely working with the Society for Social Work Research to launch the Grand Challenges in 2016. There'll be a press room, there'll be some plenaries related to the Grand Challenges, there'll be roundtables focused around the Grand Challenges, there'll be poster sessions related to the Grand Challenges. So this is sort of how each of these Grand Challenges will work. So one of the things that we also really wanted to focus on in selecting Grand Challenges and trying to shape the working papers was to make it clear that from the Academy's perspective, the social aspect that we bring to understanding our future as really the future of our planet, our world, is a social aspect, and that the social aspect is something that has been missing. When we've talked to many people, for example, we've been talking with Congress men and women about this, they say it would be fantastic to have some place to go rather than the National Academy of Sciences Institute of Medicine when we had questions about social programs and social policy. There is no place that's really doing that. So for that reason, we hope that under the umbrella of the Academy, but also the Grand Challenge, that people will start to see that there are more opportunities. Now, there certainly are places to go as it currently works, if people really were looking into that, and people have been going to the Institute of Research on Poverty, and they've been going to many other policy groups and so on, but it's our goal to have something like that within the social work profession, and to really be that go-to place within the social work profession. The social determinants of health, you know all about how significant they are, and you could say that about many other factors, environmental factors, the behavioral work that we just heard about, and so on. So we now have these working papers, and I won't read them all to you, because again, you have them in front of you. And we started out with these 3 background papers for the Grand Challenges, the Socialist Fundamental, the Grand Accomplishments in Social Work. So one of the things we wanted to do is have documentation that we as a profession have changed things dramatically in this country. So when the Children's Bureau, which used to have hundreds of employees working in maternal and child health, decided to try to reduce infant mortality all around the country, they had a very significant effect on infant mortality. Not many people understand that. When we used to have children in orphanages all across the country until the White House conference in 1910, when it started to begin to decline, it was social work that made that happen. So just trying to give, and there are many other examples there. And then the third one is about this Grand Challenges initiative, if you want to read more about it. The additional working papers are tucked under the Grand Challenges. Some of them are very obvious where they're tucked under, some of them a little bit less so. And but we have papers on mass incarceration to smart decarceration, on the human impact of environmental change, prevention of schizophrenia and severe mental illness. That one is under the first, ensuring healthy development for all youth, and so on. So we have 9 of these that are up on the Academy website. We'll get them all up before we launch. They are basically descriptions. So some of them, as I say, match up very closely to the Grand Challenge that we ended up formulating, and others are kind of representative of the work that we would expect to occur under the Grand Challenge. So, for example, there are 3 papers under the Grand Challenge of promoting equal opportunity and justice for all. One of them is on African American youth and reducing the preschool to prison pipeline. One is on immigrants and and opportunities for supporting services and opportunities for immigrant families. And the third one is on reducing the impact of stigma, interventions that can reduce the impact of stigma. Now, we could have 100 topics under that very broad topic, but those are 3 of the working papers that have been developed, and although those 3 are not complete, we had to call out for some additional papers. It's always quite interesting to see what the match is between what we say we're working on and how, and maybe people are just too busy to write these papers, but, and how focused the scholarship is around actually figuring out how to make those changes and what the interventions are, and that's been something that we've still been working on. So, the one that I want to talk about the most, because I think it gives you the best idea, it's the most developed about the possible ways to roll this out, is ensuring healthy development for all youth. And this is one that's now become, let's see, okay, so this is one that has now been crafted into a significant working paper with about 40 authors from multiple professions. And I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to skip all the grand challenges, sorry, given time, and talk about, okay, let's see. I want to talk about this one a little bit more, unleashing the power of prevention, and I think then I'll come back. Sorry. Okay, so unleashing the power of prevention, this grand challenge is titled, the lead authors on it have been David Hawkins from University of Washington and Jeff Jensen from Denver, and they have been very specific about this, their goals. They really laid out a very clear blueprint for what they would want to see. They want to reduce the incidence and prevalence of behavioral health problems in the population, kids up to age 24, by 20%, and also reduce the disparities accordingly. They want to know in a decade that the majority of the U.S. adult population will report in surveys that it's possible and cost-effective to prevent behavioral health problems. So they're working on a whole public awareness issue, that people come to understand that behavioral health problems are not something that you necessarily get because you have a crazy uncle, or that these things are out of your control and that they're not preventable, that they will know that there's good science behind these prevention programs, that we will spend 10% of public funds on young people supporting effective prevention programs. And I'm going to go through these sort of quickly and just focus on the big number, not the goals, but giving you the goals gives you some sense of the way that we're hoping these grand challenges will all evolve. In this case, that they would target 1,000 communities to roll out, to basically do something similar to Communities That Care, if you're familiar with the work in the Social Development Research Group at the University of Washington, where they assess sort of the risks in the community and then identify evidence-based practices that match up with those risks, and build a multi-sector group of stakeholders to support those interventions. That they will get all 50 states to use outcome data from controlled studies to really apply the best practices or the best science that we have available in guiding prevention programs, and that eventually states will all have a backbone organization related to prevention. Their goal, of course, is also to see that, although it isn't so much, well, there are some educational goals here. Let's see this one. Okay, so they're talking about, so this includes data work, so that we're integrated data structures, and also, very importantly, workforce development. So right now, do you have a course on prevention here in your curriculum? Yes? Lots of nodding. Okay, well, that's good. Many schools have nothing on prevention. They touch on it maybe here and there in their courses, but for schools of social work to really understand prevention perspective, not just the students who go through the joint MSW-MPH program, but all of the students, and not just an elective, but something that's much broader than that, is one of their goals, to have these cross-disciplinary prevention-focused training programs, and that would be doable, they would say, within 10 years. So this paper has already been picked up by the Institute of Medicine, which had nice overlap with a number of the authors of the paper, and was put up on their website in June 2015. So this is the kind of dissemination activities that we're hoping for, is that some of these papers will get used elsewhere, picked up elsewhere. University of Washington has been promulgating this in their community, and one of the great things about that is that they have some pretty significant donors up there in Washington State, and so looking for support there. Another one of the grand challenges is social isolation and reducing, what did it eventually get called? Eradicating social isolation, given that social isolation itself is a very hazardous program that needs interventions, and we often don't think about it that way. But Jim Lubin, who's done a lot of work on that, recently was interviewed in U.S. News about that initiative. So we're hoping that we can, well, we're starting to see some rollout of these groups that worked on these papers that are becoming sort of mini coalitions of their own. One paper has been led by two assistant professors, actually, at the University of Chicago and the Brown School, and they have got a conference going on smart decarceration that's got a variety of different sponsors, and they're going to be running this fall. That's Carrie Pettis and Matt Epperson. And so that's one way they've reached out. They reached back to the Academy and said, could you help us sponsor this under the Grand Challenges? And we said, we wish we could. The Academy doesn't have that many resources, but they found other resources to do it. And that's sort of how we're thinking that this will work. We see in some of these authorship teams that they're already bringing together people across universities who maybe hadn't worked together ever before or only slightly to work on these projects. And we think, and that's one of the expectations for our collaboration at SWR, is that we're going to be having more conversations, more opportunities for people to try to figure out how can they move forward with one of these grand challenges. We had another meeting on the financial capability, which is one of the grand challenges, and at WashU. So what else do we think could happen? We hope that we can inspire influentials in a whole range of fields to action and to join us. We hope that we can create new partnerships to achieve big goals. We certainly think that we could have partnerships with people who don't know much about social work, haven't really been connected with our capacity and don't really understand our capacity, and but also new partnerships within social work. To improve the social work to grand challenges pipeline, so what we would like to see, as I guess has been done to some extent in some schools of engineering, that PhD programs might pick up on some of these grand challenges and might say, we are going to focus, we're going to talk about the grand challenges, and we're going to try to align our work with some of the work groups in the grand challenges so that people can come into the profession and already have, in some ways, a network that they're connected to. We hope that there'll be greater interest in social work and, of course, greater benefit for society. We're hoping that if we can create materials like this, despite their somewhat unproven impact, that we can still generate, have an additional tool that could be up on every social work website. This is not one school of social work competing against another, but that would be available broadly. And we also are partnering with all the other large social work organizations, especially NASW, CSWE, and NAD. And I'm sure that there are other things that can be generated from this effort. So with that, I will finish my talk, and hopefully relatively on time, and give some opportunity for helping me to think about what else, because this is my BJ Foggish effort to find out what you all think, and I can actually get it done, and it doesn't even require overnight. We can do it right here, and to answer any questions that you might have. Yes?
I was just curious, I was looking through the list of tasks that you wanted to accomplish, and the second one, stop family violence.
Mm-hmm.
As I was reading through that, it seemed to focus primarily on physical violence. And I was curious whether or not, if I read the larger definition of what this goal entails, does it include emotional violence too, or is it really just physical violence?
So that's one of the paragraphs that actually is being rewritten, even on the plane today. We could make that clearer, but it is primarily addressed at intimate partner violence, child abuse, and elder abuse. But I think broadly conceived, the point is that those physical acts of violence are a repudiation of the humanity of those who are experiencing that violence, and that they reduce their capacity to fulfill their own potential and to add to the well-being of all. And so emotional violence certainly fits within that umbrella.
And I think that we've learned so much just in the past decade about bullying and what kinds of effects that can have on people, that it seems fitting that probably we should be looking at that in terms of family violence, and also how it ties into ensuring the healthy development for all youth.
I think that's a great example. So we have 2 papers under there right now. We have one on child abuse prevention, preventing child abuse deaths, and we have one on intimate partner violence. But we certainly, in the future, would be, I think, very interested in having additional working papers or groups that would try to put some of these things together. And we're hoping also that there'll be more integrative work. So I've worked in both of those areas, but frankly, they really experience the strategy for intervening very, very differently. And so one of the things I pushed back on, for example, with the family violence paper, it said almost nothing about social interventions. It was all about more criminal justice. And one of the efforts of the Grand Challenges overall is to focus more on social interventions rather than criminal justice interventions. So I asked them, please add more that we're doing in social work and where we have more capacity to work on relationships and social interventions rather than just allocating all of our intervention efforts to more criminal justice interventions. I think if work on bullying could also complement those and fit in a way that added to how we understand the other programs,
Well, not so
it
much
would be
just
great.
bullying, but if we know that that kind of abuse, while not physical, can have a tremendous effect on people and children, then the emotional aspect of that abuse, even in family, I think that kind of represents how much damage can be done. I didn't necessarily mean that it would have to.
Understood,
bullying,
yeah.
but using that kind of.
And so there are other, so this is another one where this topic also fits broadly under the promoting behavioral health for all, the first Grand Challenge that I talked about in a little more detail, certainly fits there. The paper that came from our colleagues here on alcohol could have fit in a number of different places. Where it is sitting now is under health, closing the health gap, because that's not exactly what it's doing, but it's one of the features if we could improve or reduce the adverse use of alcohol.
So
Yes.
after this settles out a little bit, you finalize your Grand Challenges, is there going to be some promotion to other organizations like National Academy of Engineering in case there's changes or modifications, additions to their Grand Challenges? Because if you look at their pieces of their challenges that are connected to social work, which there are some.
Yeah, there are.
I think they could use some strengthening.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've studied that, but yeah, there could be some strengthening from a social work perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, clean water for all is partly certainly a molecular problem, but it's also a social problem, right? As long as people are still watering lawns and doing all the other things that are, social behaviors, that's maybe a trivial example, but absolutely, we want to try to blend these with the other Grand Challenges. There is actually now a grandchallenges.org, a website that includes Gates and Grand Challenges Canada and one other at least, but we'd eventually like to be in conversation with the other Grand Challenges initiatives.
Couple more?
Yeah, a couple more. Tom?
Yeah, Rick, what do you imagine the pathway might be? I saw a lot of things go by that we have people that might evoke a lot of passion and interest for them. What's the pathway to getting engaged in something like this going forward?
So I think there are a number of those. Certainly people could look at the Grand Challenge working papers, and they list all the authors, and they could certainly reach out to people who are on those teams. If they know there's a Grand Challenge and they're interested in it, they can contact me, and I will try to put them in touch with folks who are working on that. At SWR, there'll be an opportunity to meet in these sort of, the roundtables are going to be structured around the grand challenges. So each grand challenge will have a roundtable, and that's an opportunity again to step up, to make a contribution to, in terms of ideas, and to try to provide leadership going forward. Again, the big data paper, Claudia Colton took the lead on that, but it could be much broader. I don't think it's as strong as it could be. I think the kinds of conversations we had here, you were having here today, suggest that we could use some additional assistance there. I think that it's going to end up being sort of person to person. There will be leadership groups that will be identified for each of the grand challenges, but those are really we only have commitment of those leadership teams to convene the roundtables and in SWR and to kind of take it to that next step, but then we need leadership after that. Yes?
I was just curious about any structures or mechanisms that are set up or envisioned in the future for monitoring progress across all the different topic areas within the social work grand challenge in general, and sort of monitoring that over time and making adjustments that might be needed.
So it's a great question. We certainly would like to be able to track some of the events. I suspect that we only have the infrastructure to do just about that, and to be communicating across the grand challenges so that although we won't take leadership of any of them, if we have ideas that are working under one grand challenge that might be beneficial to others, to try to spread the word to do that. We think that will probably end up being partly a function of an ongoing relationship with the Society for Social Work Research, but also something that we would hope to be able to do at the American Academy, although most of our funding at this point is tied to getting the grand challenges launched, and so we'll have to see whether we get enough excitement and resources to support that kind of cross-connection. Renee.
Thank you for your presentation, Dean. I was surprised. I'm sure the conversation about defining these 12 topics was intense, and I'm sure they leave some topics.
And prolonged.
And I missed one important topic, or maybe in the title should be present. I think that the issue of gender equality is crucial in the global society. I think that maybe it would include stop family violence or in another topic, but just to mention, we have a special unit at the United Nations Women. We are talking about gender equality in the global south. One of the most important issues, the issue of health for women around the world is fundamental, and the emergence of masculinities as a topic in social work. So I'm wondering if they can include this as gender equality. I'm sure most women here are going to support this idea, and I'm sure many scholars are missing this important, at least title, at least mention that.
So it's a very important question. Thank you for raising it. First off, we decided that this was going to be focused on the U.S., as did the engineers. Now they're going international, but we are not focusing on global issues. Not that we don't have gender equality issues in the United States, but they may be greater elsewhere. Secondly, we also got an inquiry from the Council on Social Work Education, Women's Leadership Council this summer about having a grand challenge added, and one-page sort of description of what that would be, but there just wasn't enough detail to really use. We did not specifically reach out, probably an oversight. When we looked at our original set of working papers and proposed grand challenges to do something on gender equality, our idea was, as we discussed it, and we did discuss it in some detail at a long meeting in Denver, was that these issues were in many different places, and that the best way to pick them up was in that way. So there are issues of stigma, there are issues of violence, there are issues of health care, financial capability, other kinds of inequity. And so we're expecting, and you know the risks of this because we expect this in our social work education around issues of gender and diversity very often, that these topics would be dispersed across the grand challenges without having a separate topic on gender equality.